Hey guys, it's Andrew Stokes here, ADSWNJ on Orbiter Forum. For today's video, I wanted to discuss property sheets, how to configure these things, what they look like, and how to set these things up. First off, I want to show you the default you get out of the box with Orbiter 2016. It's pretty much the same from Orbiter 2010. So I'm pulling across an Orbiter 26 clean install, Orbiter SDK directory, resources directory, and you get this set of files in here: VS props, debug, plugin, vessel, orbiter, orbiter root. These files actually came from an old version of Visual Studio, pre-Visual Studio 2010. I think this is Visual Studio 25 configuration. And actually, they're not useful for us in modern Visual Studio 2017. What you need is a set of files with a .props suffix on the end of them. So I've taken the liberty to put those files up onto Orbit Hanger just so you can pull these things down. And what I want to do is to demonstrate. We're going to start by pulling these things down into this directory, then configure an application. I happen to have my Scrum Attitude in front of me. I've deliberately taken my property sheets off this so we can then work this through one by one. So here goes. First off, I want to take you across to Orbit Hanger. Hopefully this is well understood. People go here all the time to find files. Inside the search, actually I'll go to the add-on gallery, go down to resources, and in resources I've put up a file, Orbiter props files for VS 2017. Go look at this. These are the files that you're going to pull down: debug, plugin, VS 2017, and orbiter root. So we're going to download this file. Open the file. I've got a props zip in this thing, Orbiter SDK, resources, and there's my props files. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to pull these in a separate window here across into my directory. Here we go. In my Orbiter directory, Orbiter 2016, Orbiter SDK, resources, I want to just plug into here these props files. Simple as that. Obviously, normally you would just do a right mouse on the file and then extract all across into that directory. So we have our files in place now. Next thing I want to show you is setting up property sheets. Your default configuration when you come into these property sheets should be debug Win32 and release Win32. Sometimes it says debug x86. That's just fine as well. You see up at the top we say x86. This x86 and Win32, they mean the same thing. If you have debug x64 and release x64 down here, go onto them, right mouse, remove them. You don't want to build any 64-bit. You don't want any configurations up here with 64-bit. There's no point because you can't build with that stuff because orbiter.exe is a 32-bit component. All right, we want to now hook these property sheets directly into our compile environment. They're existing property sheets. What we need to do is to go to the directory. Those are mine. It's an O drive. I have my Space Simulator directory. Yours is going to be different. I'll go to Orbiter 2016. I'll go to my Orbiter SDK, my resources, and obviously it finds the props files we just downloaded. I want to plug in Orbiter plugin. As soon as I install that, you see it pulls in Orbiter plugin, Orbiter Visual Studio 2017 specific things, and Orbiter root. First thing you need to do is double click on Orbiter root, look at user macros. This folder here, O Orbiter 2016, make this thing whatever you prefer for your one. My temporary install for this, my clean install is just _2016. So I'm just going to put that back in there. By the way, in here you can put in Orbiter 2016 or Orbiter 2010. That's the one thing you change, recompile, and then you retarget for a completely different version of Orbiter. That's the beauty of using these property sheets. So I'm going to apply that change. Now we've anchored the root, the Orbiter root for our stack. If you go into Orbiter VS 2017. All these module directories, they all reference back to that Orbiter dir going through. Then in Orbiter plugin, the next level up, there's just general settings in here that are necessary to make this work. So that's all you need to do in the release stack. In the debug stack, we need to do two things. We need to do that existing property sheet first, and then we need to do a further configuration on beyond that. Let me show you. We're going to install Orbiter 2016, Orbiter SDK, resources, plugin. Again, that pulls the same stack down. These are the same files in the release configuration as well as in the debug configuration. The additional thing we put on, add existing property sheet, is Orbiter 2016, Orbiter SDK, resources, Orbiter debug.props. So now I have Orbiter debug, it's on top. If yours isn't coming out on top, say yours is coming out down here somewhere, this is no good. It has to actually be higher than Orbiter plugin because it overrides some things inside Orbiter plugin. Those are all the settings you need to change inside this configuration. Let me come back to the solution view. Within the solution, properties, in here you're obviously working with debug or release, whatever your configuration is. The active platform should be your Windows 32 platform. General settings, you're looking to make sure you have a configuration type of DLL. For example, you don't want this to be set to .exe, you want it to be a DLL. Multi-byte character set, unless you really want to use Unicode, I don't recommend that for you. Use multi-byte character set. And then one other thing I want to show you in the C++, let's go to debugging next. Debugging, this will say by default something like your current target. So you can't actually run as a command line a DLL. So what you had to run is the thing that's going to call the DLL, which in our case is orbiter dir orbiter.exe. Now, if you hard coded in your actual version of Orbiter here, that's painful for you because as soon as you go to reconfigure your Orbiter dir in the property sheets, you then had to go and update it here, else you're running the wrong version of Orbiter. So I'll show you how this works with a compile and a run against this underscore 2016 version, and then I'll show you against the 2010 version as well. One thing I want to show you inside C++ code generation runtime library. This is set to multi-threaded right now. In our release mode, it's multi-threaded. In our debug mode, it's multi-threaded debug. What this means is it will compile the runtime commands into the DLL rather than having these things expecting to find an external DLL. Just give you an example of what your choices are in this. You have a choice of multi-threaded debug, multi-threaded DLL, and multi-threaded debug DLL. These two on the end, these are the ones that cause a dependency on Visual C runtime or Visual Studio runtime, MSVCR T100.dll, those kinds of files. And anytime you haven't got those things installed, your customer is going to get an error 126 coming from it. So that's not very good at all. Hard coding this in, so compiling it in, means that for sure you just have one DLL and there's no further dependencies from that DLL except where you're explicitly calling out to other things. We'll talk about those in another time. So that's your code generation. So that's all you need to know inside here. Let's have a go compiling this thing now. So we're in debug mode and we'll do a build solution. So we're starting the build in Win32 mode, running through the compile of my code here. And the result at the end of it will be something launching directly into my underscore 2016 directory, my Scram attitude. Let's just try running the debugger now. Let me bring the window across. So inside here, modules, Scram attitude, let's switch that on. I want to have, doesn't really matter for this test, but I'll start with a Delta glider and I'll just put it at default and I'll launch that. So what's happening is my environment is launching. It's launching off screen and everything is good. So I'm going to stop the debug at that point. Okay, so just to recap what we've done here, we've downloaded the props files, we've set up the property sheets. So release has got plugin, Orbiter VS 2017 and Orbiter root. The debug has got the same stack and also Orbiter debug on the top of it. And then we've made sure inside our property sheets, inside our solution, we are running orbiter.exe and orbiter dir inside here. And then we're also running the code generation is set correctly for multi-threaded. Just let me quickly show you before I finish what happens if I change the orbiter root. Orbiter root inside here is 2016 right now. Let's say I want to make this just 2010. Do that. Apply. I do another build. As I do that build solution, it's now compiling, it's including the includes out of Orbiter 2010 instead of out of Orbiter 2016. The result is actually going to target straight into the Orbiter 2010 directory. So my compile is actually generating the DLL directly into the appropriate distribution and folder that I need. And just to show you, if I run Orbiter 2010, so run the DLL, you see now I'm launching Orbiter 2010 instead. Thanks very much. See you on the next recording.